Hello guys, welcome back to my programming series. I am Mike Mathu KE, and in this programming series so far we've looked at variables. I'll put that in the description as well. You can check it out below so that you can get to catch up on everything that you've done so far. So for today we're going to be looking at functions. Now what functions are, you can hear it from the name. It's basically something that will help you perform a certain, let's say, task or objective. It has a certain function. That's the general term of how we could explain it. Okay, so as usual, I'll be doing this in both Python and C++, so that you can also get a difference between how high-level languages and low-level languages do their thing. Okay, so we're gonna switch right up. I'm going to start with Python. So in Python, this is how we do it. So write something like this, and then maybe you do if you're declaring a variable in here, let's see, something like that. Okay. So what this means, so def is just let's say a keyword to help the program know that we are going to define a function, and then you give it a name. So in this case, this is the name of the function. Okay, right? You can even see from the suggestions, this is they're showing that the type is a function. Then you'll always have to accompany it in brackets. Later we'll see that there are some variables that you can pass to the function, which we'll look at later. And then at the end of it, you write this colon. Okay, and what that says is now from here on we'll be defining the function. And how Python will know that you are defining a function, you notice that there will be a tab. A tab just to show that everything that we are writing here belongs to this scope. Okay, we call it a scope. So this is the function scope. So anything that we'll write, let me just write some random numbers. Anything that we write here will belong to the function, and anytime that we start writing something outside this, let's say b equals 1, anytime we start writing something outside this specific block, just a second, I'm just trying to highlight this. So anything that we write outside this block right here, whenever we do not have that tab anymore, it means we are no longer in the scope of the function. Okay, so so let's say maybe our function is supposed to, let's say, return a number. Okay, so usually you'll write something like return 2, for example. Okay, so what this is a return value. Okay, so what happens is once you put something, once you call a function, whenever you execute a function, okay, we say it's calling a function, and it will return a value, let's say 2 in this case. So for example, let's name this function 2, okay, for example, and all it will do is return 2. Okay, so in this I'm going to introduce something that we hadn't done before. There is a function that's already predefined in the Python, the default Python. So what it does is, if I write, for example, print 3 and I run this, you see from our terminal that we have this 3 printed out. Okay, so basically what it does is it prints the values in the terminal. Okay, this function. So this is the default function that we're going to be using to test the values that we're using. Okay, so for example, if you're trying to call a function, then this is how we do it. just the same way that we've done with print. The only difference here with print is that we're passing, there's a value that we are giving to print. And that's something that we'll look at as well. So you can execute this function, but you see now it will be returning a value. In this case, it's returning a value. So that means we can assign whatever value that we get from this function into a variable. And in this case, in this function, we'll be getting a value 2, which will be returning to this variable a. So when we execute 2, the function, we get a variable here. And then now, if we try to print a to the terminal, we get our 2. Hope you can see that. Let me just clear this so that we make sure we're getting, see that we get 2. So that's how functions work in general. So say for example, I wanted to do it in the style of print. So in this case, you see print, it's not a must that a function returns a value, okay? So when for example, in this print function, you pass a value, but it doesn't necessarily return a value. What it does is it does something in the background to produce a value in the terminal, okay? So different functions have different functions will have different functions. Basically, they'll have different works to perform. Okay. So, for example, if I create, I can create another function here. Call it number, and what I want it to return is a number. So we can pass a number here. So this, for this one, we've done something different. So for this one, we have given a value in these brackets, and what this is called is a parameter. As you can see, the suggestions are saying it's a parameter. Okay, so what a parameter is a variable that is passed onto a function. Okay, basically a value that you give to a function, so that in whatever execution that is happening, it can use that value of the variable. So in this case, so for example, if we do b equals number, and then let's say we pass 10. Okay, so this variable, we've passed it. It will be this 10. When we come to the scope of this function, num will be given the value 10. Okay, and so when we return num here again, the value will be given to b. So when you execute this, we are given the value num, which already we've passed that value to be 10, and then the result will be passed to b. So now the variable b should have the value 10. So if we try to print b, I'll just separate this. If we try to print b, you see we get our value 10. So that's how functions work. That's the basic form of the function. We have the definition of the function, where you give it a name. You have the parameters that you give, and here you can give more than one parameter. You can give as many parameters as you want, and whenever you define, let's say for example, we can pass all this, and then maybe we'll return only x. Okay, so in this case, if your parameters are in this case we have 5 parameters, then that means you have to pass 5 values. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so if you have 5 parameters, you have to pass 5 values. So in this case, we are returning x. So if you print b, you can see that you should get the value 1, which if you look at it, 1 is the value that is the value that is the second value here, which will be given the value x. So now you can see how the variables are passed on to a function. And the last thing we can do in defining functions is there's something called default value. Okay, so let me just reduce this to just one variable, and we're going to return num. Okay, so we can give this a default value. So for example, let's say 5. So now this default value, it basically means that if we do not pass a value to this num variable, then by default it will have the value 5. So that means the Python will give us the room to call this function without giving it a variable, because without giving it a parameter, sorry, because we have only one parameter and it's already given a default value. So if we do not pass a value there, it will be given the default value. So here, if we print b after executing number here, we get that our value is 5. Okay, so that's how default values work. Now we can look at this similarly in C++. So in C++, I think you remember last time we had something like this, which I said we'll come back to in this session. So here we have main. This is called a main function, and this is the general way that we define our C++ function. So in C++, everything begins from the main function. Okay, so you have this is the general form of the main function. Anything that we execute will always start from the main function. So in C++ syntax, we always have to define a return type. Okay, so let me just comment it here. So a return type, basically that means whenever we execute this function, this is something that this function is supposed to return. Okay, so in this case, if whenever we execute this main function, it's supposed to return an integer, if you remember from what we did before. So main is of course the name of the function, and then we have our brackets, and in here we usually have our arguments, the same way as Python. However, for this main function, there's usually some default parameters that are passed. They're not necessary for us to put in. Okay, but in this case, we're just going to leave it as is, and then we're going to define other functions outside of this. And then for the scope of a main function, what will define its scope is this, the curly brackets. Okay, so this will be the beginning of the scope of the main function, and this will be the end of the scope of the main function. So anything that you write outside of this, in C++ syntax, of course, anything that we write outside of this is not within the scope of the main function. So scope is very important, and then you can see here we're returning 0. This is just the default of the main function. If you return 0, it basically means the program was executed correctly. Okay, so in here I'm also going to show you how we can do something called the printing in C++. So also here I'm going to show you how we can do printing in C++. So in this printing, how we're going to do it is printf. Okay, printf. For this case, we're going to be printing integers. So First, let me write it down and then I can explain. So in C++, our function is printf. Now, for those who already know C++ syntax, you probably know a different way of doing the printf. For printing to the terminal. The reason why I'm not showing it here is because it involves classes which you have not reached yet. It's something that we'll come to see later, which is actually easier to deal with rather than using printf. So printf is something that C++ inherits from its younger sibling, which is C, the C language. And you can see here there's something that we've done here, hashtag include iostream. That's something called importing libraries. It's something that we've not reached yet. For now, just add it in your code. That is what will allow us to access this printf. And then we'll come into knowing what libraries are and how they work. So for this printf, we'll have this %d. It's basically we'll call it a formatter. Okay, so it basically allows us to, whenever we put %d, it means I want you to replace I want you to replace this %d with an integer that will be passed after this. Okay, so you can see here we have it's the printf function. The first parameter is the string that will be printed, okay, or the text that will be printed, and then the second parameter will be now the value that we're going to print out. Okay, so here if I run this, you can just wait here. I hope you can see. So our value that is printed is 2. Okay, and how it works, so this, you can see this is a string, so we can also put, it allows us, the reason why there's this formatting is because you can add more values here. Okay, so for example, if you put value, you can put a string value and then now have the format here %d, and then now we have our 2. So if I run this, you get our result is sorry, I think I zoomed in a little bit too much. Again, we get now the value, the string that we put on our text here, right? And then the variable now 2. So that's how string formatting works whenever it comes to printing. We're going to do a sample of the same functions that we did in Python. So the first one we did was 2. So remember, we're returning an integer. So int is the first data type that we'll put, and then now the name of the function, which we'll have called 2. Then you must put in the brackets, and then in this case we are not passing any variables. So all we'll do is return 2. Sorry, I got into Python land a little bit there. So again, remember, after every line you have to put a semicolon. So the return is still the same way that we're doing it. And then here in our main function, okay, in our main function is everything will start executing within the main function. So this main function is very important. And then here we can call our value 2. So you can notice this time you're doing something different. Rather than putting this into a variable first, we are calling it where the variable is supposed to be on the function. So this can also work. It's even in Python, this also works. It's not a must that you assign it to a variable before you give it to another function. Okay, you can still pass whatever value you get from a function into another as a parameter in another function call. So you can see here we're getting our value equals 2. So you can also do the number. So int number. And in this case, we have to pass in a variable. So I'm going to pass in int num. So the same way that we pass in, the same way that we declare variables is the same way that we do it here, and this time it's called a parameter, not exactly a variable, and here we'll do return num. Okay. So in this case, this time I'll assign it to a variable. So let me say int a equals number, and then 2. Let's actually do a different number this time, and then here I can print the value a. Okay, and then when I run this, then you get value 5. Okay, so in general, that's how functions work. So you can see they are made to perform a particular task. So later we'll see how we can do more robust or useful functions. For now, we are just showing how functions work, how to declare them, how to put them in syntax, and later on we'll come to see how we can really expand on the use of these functions, because functions are very powerful. Some languages like C are purely based on functions. They work purely from functions, and you can even see when we're working with C++, everything starts from the main function, which can show how important it is. Okay, so next time we'll be looking at operators. Stay tuned so you can find out what operators are and how you can use them in your applications. See you then.